Hi guys, welcome back to Castaway TV. I want to start a little series called 5 and 5, where I give 5 tips, 5 pros, 5 cons on some subject in the outdoors, and I do it within 5 minutes. So, in the first one, I want to talk about getting started in kayak fishing. Now, for most bank fishermen or anyone into fishing, this is probably the easiest way to get off the bank and get on the water. But even if you're a boat owner, this is one of the best ways to get into those hard to reach spots that you may not be able to get to on your bigger boat. Now, when you start getting into this, it's really a good idea to take into consideration and maybe renting a kayak. Lots of people do it on Marketplace. Even your kayak dealerships, unless it's like Canadian Tire, will usually rent out kayaks. And it's good to go out there and really go out for a day. Like, don't just go out there for an hour, because you're not gonna really understand what kind of wear it does on your body, the actual comfort level of your kayak. It'll give you a better idea of what you're gonna need out of a kayak when you go to purchase. The next thing you're gonna have to worry about is, how are you gonna transport this? If you're like me, you wait till the last minute, you go on the day you go to buy the kayak, you'll end up with something like this. Although this is a cheap option for loading the kayak on top of the car, this ends up going around your roof through the top. And what I found out is when it rains, it also pours on the inside of your vehicle. So you want to make sure you have a good option for that, and you also have to consider that in the pricing of what you can actually afford when purchasing your kayak. Now, a thing that I ended up figuring out real quick when I went out on my kayak adventures, actually I think the first day, was the weather and the actual waterway itself play a big factor. And if you're not that used to being out on a kayak, you really need to take into consideration of what's going on the waterway. So if you're in heavy winds, it can get pretty freaking deadly out on a kayak. Not only will the waves push you around, make it hard to paddle, but water ends up start coming into the kayak. It can get very dangerous, and if you're not comfortable with being out there, you may just want to avoid windy days in general. But you also have to think about your waterways. So I'm out here near the St. Lawrence River, and obviously in such a big riverway, there's a lot of current to deal with. And you can end up in some pretty sticky situations. I know at one point, I ended up on this point between two different parts of the riverway, and the current was so strong, I literally could not paddle or move out there on my kayak. For the next one, this one's crucial. This is your safety gear. Whether it's life jackets, safety bucket, the whistle, all those things not only are required to have, you should just have them in general. Your safety is number one. Obviously, you're on water. People drown. People drown all the time from this. And if you're inexperienced, you can easily be compromised, maybe end up flipping your kayak. And if you can't get back in or aren't a strong swimmer, you could be in some serious trouble. The other part when it comes to safety is the actual color of your vessel and what you're wearing. So in a kayak, your visibility on the water is actually not that great. It may seem like you're a big object to you, but when you got the sun beating down on the water, it creates a big glare, lots of reflections, you may not be as visible as you think, especially if you're seeing from the front or the back, where your visibility is very low to oncoming boaters. Take into consideration the color of the kayak you pick or your life jacket to make sure that you stand out in the landscape on the water. Now, the last one I ended up finding out the hard way and slightly embarrassed myself, but it's something you should take into consideration and maybe look up a few videos to learn about. But it's actually paddles and paddle techniques. So the first time I went out in my kayak, I went out paddling, and I assumed that this paddle and this paddle were the same, so I just went straight on. Although there is paddles like that, this paddle is actually offset. So the one paddle is slightly shifted to the other paddle, which helps it cut wind when you're paddling, but you need to twist your wrist as you paddle to make sure that you're actually getting the proper stroke in the water. Otherwise, you're gonna be overpowering with one arm and have a really hard time getting anywhere. The first day I went out, I was in a windstorm, not knowing about my paddle, and I was cursing, swearing. I broke the rod tip on my rod. it was a rough day for me. So all of these things that I said, definitely take into consideration if you're looking to get started in kayak fishing. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. There'll be many more tricks and tips in the future, as well as adventures along the way. And as always, just keep going, one day at a time.